that we should be providing? No? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. I think. Yeah, motion carried.
So,
Director McNabb?
so just to say that I think we need to really discuss the big picture of this. I mean, before we actually enact the changes. I mean, I think that we're missing the importance of this, the changes that we need to make. We need to make, as far as I'm concerned, I have other changes that I'll make in Beaver Creek that we're just not going far enough. This is kind of a Band-Aid where we need a tourniquet. And so, I mean, I've listened to the Municipal World article this morning, and the recovery period for people and businesses is going to be longer than anticipated. And my estimation, as my little weak mind in business, is that 1 week of this occurrence equals 1 month of recovery. And so we've been through this before in the in the Alberni Valley and the West Coast with IWA strikes in years gone by, where it completely shut off the economy. And, you know, so it's not something that I personally have not had a similar involvement with. I mean, this is likely more totally inclusive in the community than even the IWA strikes used to be. But I really think that we need to be making very broad cuts in order to minimize the impact of taxation on the citizens. So I don't know where you want to discuss that, but sooner than later is better for me.
Yeah, I assume sooner than later is probably better. Director Minions, I have you next.
Thank you. I really, I share the same concerns as Director McNabb for sure. I am very concerned about the businesses, specifically in the Alberni Valley, because we know, you know, how much of a hit that 8-month-long strike took on businesses that are established long-term businesses in our community are really struggling right now. So I definitely share that concern. And I know at the city, I've been really just constantly thinking about what can we do to really ease the burden. And I think what I struggle with, though, is that I don't think that the level of taxation and the structure of our budget allows us to actually make meaningful change in the life of people in our community or businesses. And so what I keep coming back to is we need to be advocating for programs that will help. So, and not to say that I don't think we should make more changes to the budget. I think if there are reasonable changes to be made, I definitely want to, you know, I'm interested to hear more suggestions. But I struggle with the fact that we would have to essentially shut down our organizations to make meaningful change financially for people. And I just don't think that that is the mandate of a local government. And we also have to be thinking about how we bounce back from this and how do we keep providing the services and how do we ensure long-term stability of our local government. So I share a lot of the same concerns, and I just don't know if the right approach is us completely slashing our budget. We do know, of course, that the provincial government has put in a 50% reduction to commercial class 4, 5, and 6 and industrial taxes for this year. So that will be impactful for businesses. I know, Doug, one thing that you had mentioned that I think is a really great idea is expanding the tax deferral programs that are already out there. So there's a seniors tax deferral program and a family tax deferral program. We could be pushing the provincial government to just implement a COVID-19 tax deferral program for anyone whose income has been financially impacted by COVID-19. Pushing the provincial government to put a program in place for that, where they already have the structure and program there. They would just need to expand. So those are kind of my thoughts, but I'm definitely open to hearing more suggestions of what further cuts would look like.
Sorry, I have Director Beckett next. You have to unmute.
There we go. Thank you. There's two things that I wanted to say that follows on Director McNabb's thoughts about the budget, and I think that I'm not sure that we can make those significant cuts, as Mayor Minions has mentioned. And I would like to see us take our existing staff who are not working in their particular area of responsibility to the degree that they were before the COVID-19, and assign them additional tasks or different tasks that would focus on assisting the community, the greater regional community and the businesses, and put their focuses in on trying to help those businesses access the support and federal and provincial programs that may be available out there. So that's one comment I'd like to make. And the second comment is that I did talk to Teri about the budget, and from my perspective, we have to move ahead and approve a budget. And I just needed assurances, and I got it from Teri, and Teri can speak to it in a moment, but I just wanted to make sure that just because, assuming we pass this budget, that just because we pass the budget doesn't mean that it's fixed. We can always come back as a board and make changes as necessary. So those are my two comments. Again, I'm thinking that we've got incredible staff and resources that could help help our communities and help our businesses. So anyway, I won't ramble on. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for that opportunity.
Thank you, Director Beckett. I think the first thing I'll state is I think the reason Director McNabb wants to have this conversation now is because it's right before the requisitions, which is when the payments would be mandated to the taxpayers. I think the next people I have are Director Shannon and then Director Haggard.
I was just going to say Director Haggard was first, so she can go for it.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. Please go ahead, Director Haggard.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. Teri, in her report, said that she suggested that we defer the purchase of a vehicle, but is there any ability to defer replacement of vehicles, or do they have to be purchased this year? And my second question is, in the budget, we don't have any money allocated to assist with economic recovery after this. And I think that's going to be really important. The city feels that there could be some federal dollars coming down to assist with economic recovery projects. So I think we need to be ready to capitalize on anything that could be coming down the pipe, but that could be matching dollars. I think we'd have to have something allocated to economic recovery as well. So instead of cutting, we might have to add a little bit as well. Just a thought.
A bit of Keynesianism there. Okay, so I have Director Shannon and then Director Cote, and then Director Osborne. I got to get my notepad. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Jack. So a couple of comments I have. I keep coming back, like thinking about the budget, kind of less is more. Like the less that we are taxing, in the sense, like I know we're going to be discussing things, I just feel the more that we can leave in the taxpayers' pockets will be helpful. If we're not spending it, it's theirs to have. And from my understanding, going back to Director Beckett's comment, is that I know things are flexible afterwards, but my understanding is once it's adopted today, the tax requisition is fixed. And maybe I could get clear. Okay, I'm getting nods from Deb. Okay. And then I can't find it in front of me right now, but I know Wendy had sent out an email that we could, if we wanted to, have a hospital district meeting to discuss that tax requisition. And I would be in favor of looking at that today.
Okay, I've just forgotten who's next. Sorry. I believe It was Director Cote.
Thank you. I'd like some clarification also on our sales of service. So we're forecasting that we'll be making revenue, and I'd like to know what Teri and staff are thinking about revenue, because I'm sure that that's going to fall off somewhat because of lack of action. So is there any comments from staff? Thanks.
Okay, we'll open it up to staff first. Douglas?
Certainly, Teri can speak to the revenue, and I can follow up if there's any parts that we've talked about that she overlooks. Yeah.
Go ahead, Teri.
Yeah, so we did mention in the report there's a few areas in particular that we are concerned about the revenues. The landfills are probably the largest one of that. Both landfills are incredibly busy right now, but with a different stream of garbage than what we were used to, as the commercial and construction end of things has definitely decreased. So we're going to be keeping a very close eye on that revenue stream and reporting back to the board regularly as to how that's happening. The other component is the Long Beach Airport. There's about $100,000 worth of landing and passenger fees budgeted in that service. And at this point, the airport is still open, and so we're still having to do all of our safety requirements and checks. So our costs haven't really decreased in a way for that. So that's the other one that we're working with staff. As soon as if we get this budget adopted, we're going to be changing our focus to those services in particular to kind of look at revised plans. We were really just trying to look at the things that impacted the tax requisition when we went through this, because it was a lot of work to go through. And there's a lot of revision that could be needed, but so many unknowns still at this time. The building inspection is another service that is quite heavily dependent on revenues, but at this point they've been able to find some electronic workarounds to kind of keep that process going. They're not as smooth as what it is in the office, but they are definitely still able to process, and the service is very active because a lot of people have time on their hands right now. So those are kind of the revenue portions that we have identified that are going to be significant impacts. In regards to Director Haggard's question about the vehicles, the other vehicle purchases that were proposed this year were in building inspection. That one we may come back and ask for it to be deferred, but is going to be done by reserve funds. So we didn't identify that at this point. And then in terms of the economic development part, we don't have an economic development service. So that would be challenging for us to kind of undertake, but I could let Doug might have some ideas with that as well.
Yeah, on the economic development, just by way of reminder, the cycles of emergency response or preparedness, I guess, is identifying what your vulnerabilities are and preparing for them and mitigating against them. And then when an event actually happens, then the response, and then shortly after response, in fact, we're active in talking about this now, is a conversation about recovery. And then through the recovery, we get to a new normal, whatever the new normal is after the particular event, and we get back into planning and mitigation again. And the cycle is a continuous one. So what I would observe in that, there's no question that there's two broad aspects to this particular event. One is the health aspect of it, and we're finding ourselves looking for ways to be supportive of the people who are in charge of maintaining and responding to health concerns in the province and in the nation. And then the very close byproduct, of course, is the economy. And so what I would suggest is that anything that you might have us do may not be identified yet. And so that is sort of the thinking behind a notional $30,000 and then $1,000 in each of the other two emergency preparedness services. In that, I would argue that that part of what we might do in our recovery as part of our response, part of our emergency planning, the recovery phase could involve those that are economic in some. And so we haven't got anywhere near the details of that, but I would say that that is absolutely part of the emergency preparedness cycle. And again, one of the things that we want to do in this financial plan is, after you balance your values, because they're your values to balance, we want to make sure that we're in a position to respond to anything that you want to do and have the resources and to do that. And also looking forward to 2021, that we haven't created a comparative whole between 2020 and 2021, such that at a time when I think we will still be very much in a recovery mode in 2021, you'll be presenting a tax percentage increase just to get even, which people will not be won't understand the context of that, and will put you in that put you in a difficult conversation with the community. So just back to the core question, then I think that economic recovery is arguably, strongly arguably, part of recovery, and so that would be in the realm of the resources suggested for emergency planning.
Thank you. Dr. Cote, do you have any quick follow-up before we go to Dr. Osborne?
Just looking at the revenue there, I was just thinking that maybe I've heard that the province isn't touching any of the existing budget, but I'm wondering if they're going to, if this continues on. So we have, I believe it's a grant from like Recycle BC for funding. And I just worry about our revenue coming in, being able to cover what we've got planned for the year. And thinking that, do we have any services that are shut down, that staff are not being worked? And I know that you're trying to move staff around to cover the crisis that we're going through, but I'm just wondering how that's affecting our revenue and our staffing time. And is anybody ever, are we thinking of laying off anyone in the future, or just wondering how this will affect our budget for 2020?
So I think that's going to be a week to week, if not day to day assessment. We do have one employee who's away ill. We have one who's going away on vacation. Pretty much everybody we're doing a fairly regularly, I would say a daily assessment of our existing core services and how they can be active in those, in addition to the needs of the EOC. And we're working very closely with the city in that regard as well. So we have people training today all day long on an emergency preparedness refresher course. And then we have somebody, an additional person coming over from the city. When I say coming over, they'll be working from home. So they'll be virtually coming over, but working in the EOC for the remainder of the week. And then we'll continue to assess that and trying to minimize layoffs. But I spoke to the union president this morning on as part of our continuing dialogue. So we're saying right now that we understand we'll lose some efficiency, but it's important from our point of view that if people are being paid, they're being productive to the taxpayers, to the people we serve. If they can't be productive, if we can't find a way to keep people productive, then we will have to look at layoffs, and that would create some budget surplus over time. And then if the board looks at or instigates something that they would like us to do outside of the norm, then we will either redeploy people who are currently working, or if we have people on layoff, we would call them back as soon as possible if they could be if they could support whatever it is that initiative is. That's about, I'm sorry, that's about as specific as I can get right now because it does evolve daily.
I think that's fair. Okay, so next up I have Dr. Osborne and then Dr. Haggard. Did I miss anyone? Yeah, I got you, Dr. McNabb. Thank you. Dr. Osborne, please go ahead.
Thank you. Along the lines of, well, first of all, let me say I really appreciate and understand, I think, where Dr. McNabb is coming from, and Dr. Shannon and Director Minions and everybody who has made supportive comments of the fact that we need to do everything that we can that is responsible to leave a little bit more money in property taxpayers' pockets. I think the report that the staff has provided us and the suggestions that directors have made have identified a number of places where there can be a little bit of a shaving here and there. And really though, we have 13 hours to do this. And I don't think it's possible or really that responsible to do a huge, like a wholesale change that, I mean, I don't know what a meaningful tax reduction is to other directors, but if you're thinking like on the order of 20 or 25 or 30%, I just don't think that's possible without a serious reduction in services and the very services that our constituents need in order to rebuild their businesses and their lives at this point. So I really am in line with where Director Minion's thinking is with respect to advocacy to senior levels of government, who I think bear the biggest responsibility in economic stimulus and in the short-term response that's needed for the people who need it the most. I think that working with the municipalities, I mean, I know that Tofino, Ucluelet, and Port Alberni are all turning their minds to how to get information out to homeowners who have mortgages, to businesses and the programs that are available to help support them. And that we should be pushing and pushing and pushing as much as possible to get that information out and to get programs that really work for the people that we represent. So I know we want to be seen as doing our part, and I do think that we are doing our part. And I think that passing a budget and a financial plan that permits us to continue the stability and predictability that people really need in their lives right now is far more important than trying to use the next 13 hours and finding massive reductions that for, I guess for my constituents in Tofino are going to result in a couple $100 of savings. But that is, for those who really need it, I would hope much more offset by some of the stimulus and we're going to see from the province and from the feds. So I appreciate this conversation. I don't want to beat it to death. And I think we should probably, if the majority of directors are in agreement, I think we really need to turn our mind to the actual suggestions that are made in the report and make sure that we're comfortable with them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next up, I have Dr. Haggard and then Dr. McNabb. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I have you, Dr. Bodner. Please, Dr. Haggard and then Dr. McNabb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but CEO answered my question about layoffs, so I'm good. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Dr. McNabb, and then Dr. Bodner after.
So one question I've sort of been thinking about is what is the economic impact to the budget with regards to the closing of the recycling depot? That's a staff question.
At this point, the recycle depot is going to be closed until April 18th, and they're going to review it at that point. We will have some savings from having that closed, but again, we're really worried about those landfill revenues in general, and the tax requisition in the AV landfill service is relatively small. We also, for that recycle depot, get some offsetting revenues for the amount of, or the quantities of products that we send off to Recycle BC, and obviously we won't be getting those revenues as a result of the closure. So we're looking at that. I think that's probably been the number one question from the public is why is that closed and can we have it open? People are missing that service, but we don't want to reopen it unless we can operate it in a safe and effective manner. So we aren't sure how long we are going to keep that facility closed at this time, and so have not considered a reduction of that cost.
All right, thank you. Does that satisfy your question, Director McNabb, or do you want
It
follow-up?
doesn't really quantify the question, no. I was looking for, on a monthly basis, what is the financial impact, negative, positive? So is it 35,000? Is it costing us 10 plus? That's the kind of answer I'm looking for.
So just a burn rate at that point, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Teri, do you have that answer at
Yeah,
hand? Or is that
we
something
don't
you-
have that exact information at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you. Next up, I have Director Bodner and then Director Beckett.
Yes, thank you. It's just a comment. I'm still learning about all this budget and getting a lot of good feedback, but there seems to be so many unknowns. There seems to be no right or wrong answers, and it seems that everybody everywhere is going to have to make sacrifices somewhere. So I think, rather than getting into a lot of detailed specifics, that we're better off looking at the whole picture of what's going to work for everybody. It's just a comment.
Thank you. Director Beckett, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was waving to my family, but I will say that I concur with Director Osborne. I think she articulated extremely well my perspective on the budget. Thank you.
Okay, so just for everyone's edification, the discussion we've been having has been a general one, but it's been speaking to the motion, I believe, that I read out, but I don't know if it was moved and seconded on Part A. So it's 5.1A. Wendy, I can't remember if anyone moved or seconded it.
I've got that one as carried.
Carried already? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so just after the fact. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so barring any other discussions, I'm wondering if we want to keep moving through the agenda. The next item would be B. Director Cote, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I have a question about the last conversation, which would be on page 27 in the budget, or 42 on of the agenda. So it's line 36, and it talks about residential pickup. And I'd like to know, it says participant. So is Sprout Lake paying into that?
The residential pickup in the Alberni Valley is fully paid by Recycle BC. We actually make a small amount of money on that program to provide education services to the Valley.
Okay, thank you. That helps. And this won't affect our organics grant, or I'm concerned about the province pulling back on any grants that haven't been spent. So.
The organics grant is still under review, and we have not received any indication from the province that any of these grants will be impacted by this at this time. But that grant is still under review by UBCM. So if anything, it might just hold up the review depending on how busy they are.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate this is somewhat anecdotal, but we had our time for emergency preparedness grants, for one of the emergency preparedness grants to be extended until March 27th, and they provided a very quick turnaround. The staff people who work on these things to say, you've got line X, and line X isn't eligible, but if you add another one of line W, then we'll probably be fine. That seems to indicate that in some cases they're trying to expedite these. That said, that's a small grant, and that doesn't compare to the large one we're trying to work with to reconfigure for the board's purposes.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe I saw a lot of movement, but I wasn't sure if anybody wanted to speak. Okay, Heather, please go ahead.
Thanks. I was just going to mention that I was planning on applying for the evacuation route planning grant for the Alberni Valley, and I noticed yesterday that UBCM delayed the intake due to COVID, so that one's definitely going to be on hold.
Okay, so if we're not having any further conversation in a general sense, Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So why don't we roll through these ones that we've got in front of us, and then if we've got additions at the end of it, we can maybe do that. Is that possible?
I think that's the most optimal route, yes.
So I would move that the Board of Directors amend bylaw F1149 electoral area administration, page 20, as follows. Line 3, tax requisition decreased by $8,000. Line 17, AVICC dues and convention expenses decreased by $8,000.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Director Cote. That's what I was going to ask for. Any further comments? Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you tell us what our dues are? And just from AVICC, I'd like to say that the convention is canceled, but we have to have our AGM sometime this year. And right now the policy says that it needs to be a face-to-face. So we're looking at making some changes there. Maybe it could be a virtual meeting, or they suggested that if UBCM is actually happening, that we might be able to have our AGM at UBCM. So just a little information to pass along. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
The AVICC dues last year were about $1,100. We have not received a bill for.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments on item B or sub B? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. That brings us to item C. That brings us to item C. Go ahead, Director McNabb.
So I'd move that the Board of Directors amend bylaw F1149 Alberni Valley Emergency Planning, page 25, as follows. Line 2, tax requisition increased by $30,000. Line 11, emergency response and recovery increased by $30,000.
Do we have a seconder? Director Johnson. Any further comments on the motion? Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So I'm wondering what the thought process is to the line 11 change. If emergency planning, if we expect that the province is going to be contributing towards that particular part of the recovery process of it, why are we taxing for it? I'd like to hear about that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Heather to describe what's happening right now in terms of applications for funding recoveries under the task number, and then I'd like to make a comment.
Please
Sure.
go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. At this point, we're submitting expense authorization requests to EMBC for things that we're currently expensing. Hand sanitizer, cities renting out some of their tents to the testing location, some advertising costs for getting community messaging out. But at this point, we don't know if they're going to be approved or not.
So we have EMBC saying that everything has to be applied for before spending, but they're not really getting back to us in a timely way, which is exactly what I expect. They've created a very narrow funnel process-wise. Additionally, we're thinking is that these expenditures would be within the board's purview to do something that, even if it eventually was not recovered by EMBC, if it was important enough to the board to do, then they wouldn't have to hesitate and wait for those approvals, and they would have some budget room to do that without creating a deficit. So that was the thinking behind this. Oh, and obviously the board doesn't have to spend it if the board doesn't want to spend it naturally.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Just prior, it was kind of explained that that line was actually recovery, but I see it's response and recovery. So, you know, I guess we can accept that explanation. Thank you.
Thanks. Director Shannon.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if we have reserve budget anywhere, is this something that could come out of that, or is it better that we, or staff's recommend, obviously their recommendation, but can we speak to that a little bit, like using reserve versus taxing more at this time?
So because of the way the regional district format is set up, where each service is deemed to be standalone, we can't draw on reserves from other services to support this initiative. And the Alberni Valley Emergency Planning Service does not have a reserve fund of its own.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, seeing
Thank you.
none.
Oh, Penny,
Oh, go ahead. Please go ahead.
my hand up. Or my hand. Okay. So this is for all areas or just the Alberni Valley?
Go ahead, Teri.
This one is just for the Alberni Valley, and then the item D would be for the Bamfield Emergency Planning Service for the $1,000, and then item E would be for the Long Beach Emergency Planning Function. Those are the emergency planning services that we run as the ACRD.
So I'm just wondering why Bamfield isn't included with the Alberni Valley, and would Long Beach be working with then the West Coast incorporated communities?
So Bamfield Emergency Planning is a separate volunteer group on the West Coast, led by a volunteer coordinator. So that's why it's actually a separate service. And then with Long Beach Emergency Planning, it's a fairly inactive service, except for that it has a contract with the District of Ucluelet to provide some services to the residents of the area. And so that would be for that service itself.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions on this sub C? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Great, thank you. All right. Okay, that brings us to sub D. So this looks like it's Bamfield Emergency Planning. Director Beckett, would you like to move the motion? Okay, so the motion states that the Board of Directors amend bylaw 1149 F1149 Bamfield Emergency Planning, page 49 as follows. Line 2, tax requisition, increase by 1,000 to 22,350. Add a line after line 8, emergency response and recovery, increase by 1,000 to 1,000. And that's so moved by Director Beckett. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
All right, thank you. I think Director Roberts got there. Okay, so with that in mind, are there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All righty. Okay, that brings us to sub E, which is In response to Long Beach emergency planning. Ken,
Yeah, so
go ahead.
would you like me to read that out?
Yeah, if you would.
Recommend that the Board of Directors amend bylaw F1149 Long Beach Emergency Planning, page 57 as follows. Line 2, tax requisition increased by $1,000 to $12,433, and add a line after line 6, emergency response and recovery, increased by $1,000 to $1,000. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Director Beckett. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item F. Director McNabb, please go ahead.
Yep, I would move that the Board of Directors amend bylaw 1149 Beaver Creek Water System, page 90 as follows. Line 64, less capital expenditures decreased by $10,000 to $50,000.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Are there any further comments? Okay, hearing none. I don't think I saw any. Checking again. Nope. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to, please go ahead.
So before we go to third reading of that, I've got a couple of trial balloons I'd like to fly. One of them is a reduction in directors' travel and staff or management conventions. So I don't know if Teri would maybe like to, I'd like to see like a $10,000 reduction in both of those accounts, simply because they're not going to be likely used to the same extent as we planned. So I'd like to have Teri's take on that, and then I can make a motion on it after that.
Thank you. And Teri, could you identify the line that it's on? I'm just we might as well do that. Or Director McNabb, if you would.
Well, I got two computers running here, and I still don't have.
Okay.
When you go through this, it's tough to keep alignment.
Go ahead, Teri.
So the financial plan page would be for staff's convention and professional development would be line 19 on page 7 under general government services. And then the directors section, it would be line 28 and 30, the directors in, or sorry, 30, the directors travel. With regards to the staff professional development, Doug and I did talk about this line item. You will notice that we did go over budget last year. We have a number of us that have requirements that need to be met based on our designations to have professional development done every year. I haven't seen anything come through to say that we are not going to have to achieve that this year. We also have a member of staff going through a master's program for which we are contributing partially to that. A number of our conventions actually take place in the fall. 2 members of staff, one nearly finished, 2 members of staff working on their master's program, which we're contributing to financially. A number of our conventions take place in the fall. The convention that I was supposed to attend in June, they're looking at an electronic format. So I anticipate it might be at a reduced rate, but will still be at some costs. So I think 10,000 would be aggressive with that. And I don't know if Doug has any thoughts about it.
Go ahead, Doug.
Just to observe that some of it's already been spent as well. I went to the CAO's forum earlier this year.
Okay, so with that in mind,
So what about the directors one?
So the director one is also challenging to note because we don't know how long this is going to last. So chances are we probably aren't going to use the whole thing, but if we start having to have more policy meetings, that's one of the things we're going to have into EMBC to state if having policy meetings is covered by EMBC. But if it's not, the frequency and amount of meetings between now and whenever this pandemic ends is unknown at this time. So again, we didn't know what target to kind of hit if we were to reduce that amount.
Okay, thank you for that. And you may want to see a switch over from director's travel to using that to help get people set up for better telecommuting into meetings for policy purposes. I don't know. With that in mind, though,
So
Dr.
I've got a
McNabb,
couple
yeah.
more.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the notes underneath, one of the things is the Beaver Creek parks, and I would like to remove that $10,000 that was going to go into reserves from the Beaver Creek Park budget. So I would move that.
Which line item is that? It's in the 70s, correct? I think.
It's community parks. She didn't give a line.
So the financial page would be page 82, Beaver Creek Community Park, and it would be a reduction of tax requisition by $10,000 to $24,785, and line 6, contribution to capital fund, would be reduced by $10,000 to 0.
Okay, those references hopefully have been captured by Wendy. Are there any comments on that?
So I'd move that. So I don't have a seconder.
I'll second that for you, John.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Coots. Any further comments? Okay, so this is specifically those two lines. Is that correct? I think it was 2 lines.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm keeping track there. Okay, so with that, that there, no further comments, it seems. So all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so parks reductions.
So
just keep going, Director McNabb. Yes. Yeah.
So the other thing I would like to move is that from the beginning of April to the 15th of June, that we remove a director's remuneration. If I can get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Bodner. Please go ahead, Dr. McNabb.
So, I mean, I really think it's far more symbolic than it is financial. The impact on the average citizen in the community is just, it's very real. Even if they are able to get unemployment insurance, there's a lag time, plus it's a percentage of their pay, plus, and it is taxable. So nobody's coming out clean on this. I mean, the programs that are in place or semi in place for businesses have really yet to be defined, and when that's actually going to end up in somebody's pocket, I have no idea. And what that's going to look like, the burden of proof for the actual businesses and contractors, people that are in business for themselves, it's still anybody's guess. I mean, it sounds good when it comes on a microphone, but when you have to prove that you've got a 30% reduction in your cash flow, I expect that that's what they're talking about, income. It's not 30% based on what, like 30% for the month of April, or 30% for the month of March, 30% for the year. You know, they haven't defined it. So people are really going to be scrambling to get the real money back. And when that money is going to come back is completely another thing. So, I mean, I'd like to see us make this gesture. I don't think there's any of us in the system of directors that are going to be turned upside down by that, especially with the level of meetings that we will be having, and the fact that they're from, in my case, from our China room. You know, it makes it a lot less onerous and a lot less intrusive on our overall life. So, I mean, it's certainly everybody's decision to make, but I would certainly like to see us do that. And the overall, as was forwarded by Teri, the overall impact to the budget would be about $27,000.
Thank you. I have Director Osborne. Was there anyone else who'd like to speak? Director Cote, Director Beckett, Director Shannon.
Thank you. I appreciate the intention, and I think it's laudable, and I think it shows really thinking about what's going on out there in people's lives right now. But I can't support it. I think that Director McNabb makes a point that it is everybody's decision to make, but this is a motion that the board would vote on, and it would make the decision for everybody else. That's not democratic enough for me at this time. If a director wishes to give up their remuneration and donate it to a charity or to a nonprofit that is helping those people who need it the most, I urge you to do that. I think that's a wonderful and generous gesture to make. Unfortunately, at my age and with the other income that I have lost through this, I depend on my elected official income at this time. And for me, it would be difficult to lose it, even to lose a small portion of it for the next quarter. I think that we're all working really hard, and I think we deserve to be remunerated for that. I think our job is already underpaid as it is, my personal opinion. And so I can't support it. And I really thank you, Director McNabb, for bringing up the idea, but I think that each director should make their own decision about what they want to do with their remuneration. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next up, I have Director Cote and then Director Beckett.
Thank you. I think that Director Osborne said it very well. Everybody has a different scenario as to where they're coming from. Personally, I seem to be busier than ever. My community I'm sent out a couple of emails that came to me. Lots of messaging things happening, messenger to me, messages to myself about the budget and about what's happening in our community. People are asking me to step up now. I was sick, and now I really want to start communicating with my community, and I agree with the Director Osborne. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Cote. I have Director Beckett and then Director Shannon. And please raise your hand or wave wildly at me if I missed you. And Director McNabb, I think your camera shifted. I can only see the top of your head.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sitting back.
Oh, okay.
I'm listening.
Okay.
You all I need to see is my ear.
Okay, Director Beckett, sorry.
Thank you,
Please go
Chair.
ahead.
Thank you, Chair Jack, and thank you, Director McNabb, for moving forward. The glare was starting to blind me, and I recognize the challenge that us follicle challenged folks have. On a serious note, I agree again with Mayor Osborne. I think it should be a separate or an individual decision. I know that when I agreed to put my name forward, I made a decision with respect to not renting out one of my units so that I would have it available for me year round in Banfield. And I had to replace a vehicle because of the additional travel back and forth. And I don't want to have my family, have to offset those additional costs on top of it all. It's a terrible time for everyone. But again, I think it does have to be an individual decision, not a board decision. But thank you, Director McNabb, for bringing that forward. Very brave of you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Beckett. I have Dr. Shannon up next and then Director Cote.
Thank you. I just have a couple points. My first one was it Director McNabb's intention for our monthly remuneration and not the extra committee meetings we could reimburse for, like apply for, or all of it? And then I think I just want to show that I think I appreciate the fact that Director McNabb's asking of this, because it would be an impact on everyone's homeowners and property owners' tax requisitions, rather than us deciding to give it to a charity and try to give it back to all their participants with property taxes. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Director Cote and then Director Bodner.
Thank you. Question to staff. Doesn't our remuneration come out of like general funds, so it wouldn't necessarily just affect one area? Thanks.
Yes, it comes out of general government, so it affects all areas.
Thank you. So I have Director Bodner, and I'm not certain if I missed anyone else. I don't think so. Oh, Director Coots, thank you. So Dr. Bodner and then Director Coots.
Yes, I think I respect Director McNabb for what he said as well. However, I feel all of us have had to make some kind of sacrifices in our lives to be a commitment to be director, and should be paid accordingly. I know myself, this is a whole new learning curve for me, and I am doing the best that I can to try to learn as much as I can in as short a time as I've got. And I really feel that Director Osborne is correct in what she's saying. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Coots, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank everyone for the hard work that they're doing for their community and the people, and dealing with everything that we're dealing with. I see everyone working harder and longer hours, myself included. I don't get remunerated through the regional district any longer. I'm fully funded through my government. And I think it's really honorable and exciting to see that directors are wanting to reduce the stress on the homeowners and the taxpayers. And I just wanted to say thank you to that. And I'm just really happy. I wanted to let everyone know that yeah. So I'm fully funded through my government, so there'll be no impact to the taxpayers for me. And no, I'm just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm wondering if I missed anybody. Oh, okay, Director Cole, and then maybe Director Osborne. Okay, so Director Cole, please go ahead. Oh, you are muted. You're muted. There we go. Try again. No. Do you have a headset you can put in and plug in?
She's on her iPhone, and I've noticed some other Zoom calls that people have trouble on their iPhones sometimes when they're trying to do this.
Yeah. So the solution I've seen for iPhone folks would be to leave the meeting and then rejoin and make sure your microphone is unmuted when you come back to the meeting, like that you're using your microphone. Sometimes I think it's supposed to be, it stays muted if you come into the meeting muted, even though that's a very safe thing to do for Zoom meetings. So are there any further comments in regards to this? Well, we hope Director Cole can get her headset. Okay. I'm sorry this isn't working out, Director Cole. So Director Johnson has stated you can try to use the chat if you want, if you had a quick comment. Okay, so just move on. Okay. So with that in mind, we do have a motion that was moved by Director McNabb and seconded by Director Bodner in regards to the remuneration for directors. So unless there are any further comments, I'm going to call the question. Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Okay, so that's motion defeated. Okay, so I think Director Bodner, I'm getting some background noise from your iPad every once in a while. Is there a way that you can mute your mic when you're not speaking?
Oh,
so just tap the screen and there should be a little microphone icon somewhere. And if you tap that, it'll cross out. And that means
where it says mute.
Yeah.
Okay. When I'm not speaking.
Yeah. There we go. So you are shown as muted now on the screen for everybody. If anybody has their microphones muted now and you have a keyboard attached to your device in some way, holding space will actually unmute your mic for you. It's like hold it down to speak and then let go and it's back to mute. It's pretty useful. Okay. Okay. I just got a request from a director in regards to discussing hospital district before we go to third reading. But we can do second reading now. So now that all of the motions have been passed, unless Director McNabb, you had any other items you'd like to put forward before we get there?
Isn't there anybody else in this meeting?
I saw that you were unmuted, so I thought maybe you were getting ready to speak.
Are we going to discuss the page 10 in our agenda? There's some service for potential change that was listed.
Okay, we can have a further review of that from Douglas and Teri. I just want to give Dr. McNabb another shot. If he had a list and we didn't get through all of them.
No, I have finished my list.
Okay.
Thanks. I mean, there are some in this services for potential change that are worth discussion.
Okay. I'm thinking Douglas or Teri, whomever was the author of the briefing note. Teri, do you want to just give a quick overview of some of the suggestions that could occur and where the impacts are? So maybe let's stick it to the general government and the regional planning, the high level stuff. I think that specific to areas is something that the areas would have covered on their own anyway.
Okay, from a general government perspective, we brought up the audiovisual boardroom upgrades as a potential. So these items are items that we were going to fund through the capital reserve account, but if we did not proceed with them this year, we could reduce the capital fund contribution in order to make that happen. So the audio visual boardroom upgrades are something that staff do not recommend. We feel like the board's been clear that they would be beneficial to conducting business, and it's kind of become even more apparent during these times of COVID and staying at home. Budgeting software, to be honest, this one will break my heart if it gets removed, but it is a project item this year. I think it could be achieved remotely. I think it'll create efficiencies in the department that will provide us value in other areas. But that is an option. And then the office renovation was the third component that we considered but did not recommend. The front entrance is problematic as it has a very small landing. The bushes are getting larger and are a bit of a safety concern. and just the general accessibility for the public is challenging. So that could be delayed until next year, but we're also thinking if there are contractors still working, the fact that the office is closed to the public and has limited amount of staff in it, that this actually might be a great year to achieve this project if we're able to find people to do it. So those are kind of the general government ones that staff considered, but do not recommend.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other items that folks would like to pull out in regards to this? So the way the briefing notice is set up is that it shows all of the suggested motions, and then it goes into detail for the services for potential change and the other item, potential extra expenses, kind of explaining why the motions were created the way they were and what was taken into account and what was recommended and what wasn't. So Director Cote, did you have any specific questions in relation to those ones? Or do you just want to make sure that we covered that off just in case?
I wanted to make sure that we went through our agenda and covered off everything. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Director Cote. It's a good suggestion just to make sure though. Director Shannon, do you have your hand up or? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Just following up on what Teri went over here, I did want to ask about the office renovations because in the agenda it says $40,000 there. On the capital project summary it says $60,000. Did that get decreased by 20 and I can't find it, or are we at 40 or 60?
So there's 60 in the budget, but there's some things that absolutely need to be done and some things that have already been done this year. There was some drainage problems. There's a leak in the basement that needs to be addressed. So those things are not discretionary at this time. It would just be the renovation of the front entrance that we felt could be pulled.
Okay, and then I guess my comment on the boardroom upgrades, while I appreciate that this is beneficial to this time, I'd just like to point out we're not even in the boardroom right now. I know that can change, but we don't know when that's going to change. And then if going back to the renovation and upgrades, if there was a way to renovate the most important part of that, if there's a way we could cut this back, if this is going to affect tax requisition, like I know the bushes and the stairs, but if there's a plan for like a wheelchair ramp or something, I feel like we already have that. And I'm just trying to be cognizant of perception from constituents. Like if we're going into this pandemic and a lot of people are struggling, I worry about the perception of the renos are happening and it's visual to the outside and we see new vehicles, and I just want to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Director Shannon. I thought the vehicles were being pushed forward a year, and the renovation thing can also be communicated as helping contractors who may be out on work. That's I think something that returns to the economic recovery function, is partially doing what we're doing as a government to continue stimulating the economy, continuing with any contracts we have to continue that ball rolling. I think the point of departure, where we have to make our differentiations in our communications is, are we providing help at a lower level spread thin, or are we helping contractors who are also doing the same sort of thing? And that conversation kind of parallels a bunch of conversations economically about what governments should do. So I don't expect everyone to agree, but I think from a communications and perceptions perspective, there are 2 points. First point is we can communicate as if what we're trying to do is go local and support contractors if they're available, and I'm going to assume that they are. And the other is just, I think the people who will be disappointed are going to be disappointed unless we make huge changes, because it's more about the sentiment than it is about what we're actually doing. So I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking too much about the Facebook usual suspects, but it's not going to matter what we do for those folks. And so you just kind of zero them out. That's
okay,
just,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. just for clarification then, my understanding was that we're deferring one vehicle purchase, but there was 3 on the docket and 2 need to be replaced. So there essentially would still be 2 new vehicles.
So there's one planned through building inspection with reserve funds, and we've left that in the budget, but we'll have to see as time permits how that's going. There is the dump truck in the Beaver Creek water system that is a safety concern, and they're wanting to proceed with as soon as possible.
Okay.
And then the vehicle in general government was deferred to 2021 based on motion A that you guys passed.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further comments?
Penny here.
Go ahead, Penny.
So I'd just like a reminder why page 37 of your agenda, 22 of the budget, line 2, for management of development rural areas. I've forgotten why there's a 90% or almost a $90,000 increase. Could I please be reminded?
Please go ahead, Teri, if you can.
I'll take a try at this and then Mike can jump in. So there's a number of initiatives that are in the service this year, including the bylaw enforcement notice, so the municipal ticketing, the short-term vacation rental initiative. There is, Mike, I think I'm going to need your help.
I can jump in to provide a bit of a summary if you'd like.
Please go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so a couple of the main things. You noticed the surplus went down from last year because we were getting some of the things accomplished. There is completing the projects like the zoning bylaw, short-term vacation rentals. There's staff time included to continue and monitor that. There is also the increase in bylaw enforcement and the ticketing, which we are working on to finalize. There's also implementation or resources in there or staff time to enforce the burning bylaw. So we are going to be bringing the burning bylaw to the board for the next board meeting with some recommendations to adopt. I would also note that during this COVID crisis, the province has said that the province has implemented a burning ban, and it applies to our area. There was a news release put out yesterday, and local governments are enforcing this. So we need the resources to do some of that. So I think that covers off most of that. And happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Cote, follow up? Yeah.
Thank you. So the wood stove rebate, is not tied into the bylaws, and that I see that like the actual for 2019 was just under 8,000, and this year we budgeted 32,900. So would that not be part of the bylaws?
So the wood stove exchange.
So the wood stove exchange. Sorry, Mike. The wood stove exchange program is flows through general government, and it's fully funded from the BC Lung Association grant, but it is solely for advertising for people to do wood stove exchange, like actually replace their units, and then providing them grants. But it's not to do with the enforcement of wood burning bylaws.
Thank you.
So that's covered by grant then?
Go ahead.
Yes, fully covered by a grant. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for that discussion, everyone. Just one last check-in to see if there's any other comments or questions before we move on to finishing off second reading and then potentially having a conversation about hospital district before we get to third reading and then adoption. Okay. Dr. Haggard, are you just in support, or do you have something you want to say?
Just a final comment. Mr. Chair, you read my mind when you talked about hiring contractors to do that work. That can be part of our economic recovery support local contractor, so I do agree with that motion. However, as Director Shannon brought up, I do believe that any renovations to our boardroom, and I believe it was doing live streaming, if I could be wrong, but I think that can be something that can be put off to next year. I don't think that's imperative at this time. I mean, who knows how long we're going to be doing this from home. So I think that's something that could be put off.
Director Minions?
Thank you. I actually think that the fact that we don't have live stream capability or some kind of capability to broadcast this, it highlights even more the need to make those updates now. And maybe it doesn't need to be those specific updates, but maybe a portion of that budget could be used to figure out how we can be getting this on YouTube like the city is doing. I think that the fact that we're conducting a budget meeting that literally no one has access to right now highlights a big problem in how we kind of are operating, because we are a bit behind the times. These are extenuating circumstances, and so I think everybody, you know, expects that we have to do business however we can, but most local governments, I think at this point, at least have the ability to live stream these meetings like we are doing at the city and many other places, so that people still have access to their government. And I have a problem with the fact that people don't have any access to this meeting. This is an important meeting for people to be able to watch, and we're supposed to do all budget in public. So even if we did put off a bit of that, the budget for the equipment, maybe a portion of that could be used just for, you know, setting up the YouTube capabilities and things like that on a more urgent matter, so that we can be doing our business of the public publicly.
Mm-hmm. So I have a comment, and then Director Cote, Director Roberts, and then Director Coots. So I think what I'm going to say is I'm very much in favor of using any money that was put aside for that equipment to be used into bandwidth, because uploading to YouTube is going to hit the office's ability to send video and audio to us, and then the meetings themselves, the quality will reduce because of that. The actual process of broadcasting this, give me 20 minutes and I can broadcast this live to Twitch right now. So that's not difficult, but it will require some actual process around it because of the system and because we have our own department. I think in the future, if we're having another board meeting, that we just invite Dave and I forget her name, the other media person, just to be a participant, but maybe always.
Elena.
Thank you. I was going to say Carly, but she's not there anymore. So, okay. So with that, I think that's a good idea. Next person I have is Director Cote, and then Director Roberts, and then Director Coots.
Oh, thank you. I totally agree with this. Getting this, I've had comments to that I've seen on Sprout Lake Chatterbox and whatnot, and people are very upset that this is a closed meeting. They wanted to have, they've been asking me to ask to have this meeting postponed, and I, explained to them that we're mandated to have our budget passed today. Today is the last day. But they were very upset that they couldn't have any public process participation in the budget at this point, and having this meeting behind closed doors, people are upset. The meeting, excuse me, today is recorded, so I'm not sure if we could. I'm not sure if the recording is visual as well as audio.
I'll stop you there. We can just, whoever is recording right now can immediately upload this to Facebook and YouTube afterwards. That's not a difficulty at all.
Okay, then I would like to see this uploaded, and I'm not sure if I need a motion, but
let's do that after all the budget stuff right before adjournment. Yeah.
Okay, further along. If no one's opposed, I think that we should do that and upload it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Director Roberts. Oh, you moved around. Where are you now?
There
you are. Okay.
Are we going to discuss further any services for potential change prior to going on to the hospital budget?
Only if you have any.
Well, actually, I do. One of the items that that we wanted to talk about was the Salmon Beach Services budget. That there was a recommendation to take the money that was put aside from the Community Works Fund, transferring it from, we had anticipated putting more money into the sanitary project, the sewage treatment facility, and I've discussed this with staff and also with the budget committee, the chairman actually at the Salmon Beach, and the Salmon Beach personnel have indicated that they would like to split that budget as is listed there. We'd like the board to reconsider allocating $50,000 of the Community Works Fund grant back to the sewage project, and that would provide $50,000 for Salmon Beach Water Project and $50,000 for the Salmon Beach Sewage Project.
Do you have line references or citations? I think that would be the only thing that we'd need in addition, and then
that was on page 12
of the budget or of the PDF.
Of the PDF.
Okay. Okay, so they do have line references on the left side there, so let's just note those ones.
Okay, I don't see that on mine.
Page 12 of the PDF, sorry, or of the actual budget.
I'm sorry. This is the this part of the financial plan, the budget.
Okay, so
I could tell
ahead,
you what they would be if you would like me to read them out. Okay, so it would be, so this would affect the electoral area administration budget as well as the Salmon Beach sewage budget and the Salmon Beach water budget, because these are community works funds. So it'd be electoral area administration, page 21, and I'll send this to Wendy after. So it would be increasing the Salmon Beach sewage Sandyfield upgrade from 0 to 50,000, and it would be decreasing the Salmon Beach water well development by 50,000 to 50,000. So basically moving from 50,000 from one of those to the other. And the impact of that would be the Salmon Beach sewage budget, page 64, the grants would increase by 50,000 to 50,000. And in Salmon Beach water, the grants would decrease by 50,000 to 50,000.
okay, so I was able to follow you there, so I think that's clear.
Well, thanks for that.
So would you like to make that a motion, Director Roberts?
I would. Yes,
okay.
I would.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Johnson. So any further comments? Dr. McNabb?
So just on a point of order, these community works funds are a requisition from the electoral areas. Mm-hmm. So it's funds that are electoral area directed. Is that not correct? So the voting on this would be electoral areas directors only?
I think it
just
might
looking
be.
for guidance there.
Doug, I'm gonna need your help with that.
I would say no, because we're voting on the budget. The budget's
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would concur that these are amendments to a reading on the budget bylaw.
Okay, so with that in mind, though, I think it might be helpful to check in with the electoral area directors, just so that all the other voters have a sense of where they're coming from there. So I'm going to start with Area A. Bob, is that all right with you? This isn't a vote, it's just your opinion. Yep, that's a thumbs up. Area B.
Did you get that?
I did not. I wasn't looking in the right place.
Sorry, I'm on the iPad and I'm jumping between iAnnotate and Zoom.
Oh, okay.
And I got to go back and unmute. I'm on board with that.
Okay. Area C. You moved around again. Dan, I think that's area C. I think that's you. Okay, that's the feline vote is having it. All right. Area D.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, by moving this, will that make any financial change at all to the budget? I think that it doesn't really affect the taxation bottom line by doing that. So could that be please affirmed?
Teri, go ahead.
Yeah, there's no tax requisition impact of this decision. This is a transfer of the community works funds between projects.
Then at this time, it really makes no difference to the bottom line of this budget. And I think I'd really like to see this referred back to the electoral area directors dealing with their community works funds, because we did have quite a discussion in the past on this, and really it's going to make no difference to the Salmon Beach budget. So I'm not sure why this was being brought forward at this time after the discussions that we had. So maybe I could be enlightened as to why it's being brought forward now, and when there is no financial change. Thanks.
I think it's in response to the situation. So this would be a time to do it, even if it's not necessarily affecting the requisitions themselves. This is still a budget period, and we can do that. That's where I'd be coming from at that point.
I just don't see any benefit by doing that when really the taxation remains the same. Could we hear from maybe Director from the area, from Long Beach, from Cal, the Director Roberts? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair, the reason that this has been brought up is because under the budget, it goes to services for potential change. And after discussions with the members and the community at Salmon Beach, since this money had already been allocated, we wish to utilize it to our best advantage out there, in that dealing with sewage out there is a priority, clearly. And while we want to do some improvements there, the money originally, and things have changed clearly, any water utilization out there has to go into, for the most part, go into the sewage treatment facility. That is the Sandy Field. So we wanted to ensure that before the water gets flushed, it's going to somewhere that's going to be able to handle a situation. And I discussed this with staff as well, and also with the community leaders out there. And so I think it's an appropriate utilization of funds. And because it is budgeted money already through the Community Works Fund, we wanted to get this cleared up for the 2020 and 2021.
Okay, thanks for that. Director McNabb, do you have a sense of?
Okay, so we've been booting this. Are we on there? Yeah, we've been booting this around for a bit. This allocation of Community Works funding by the region, by the electoral area directors, was specifically placed for improvements in the water system. So the last meeting that we had with regards to the budget, this was directly allocated to the sewer system. So the $100,000 was allocated to the sewer system. I spoke on that, and we agreed at the time that we would put $50,000 of that $100,000, because the community had budgeted $50,000 to the water system, that we would put $50,000 of this grant money towards the water system, and they could put the $50,000 that they were going to put on the water on the sewer side. so net zero. So now they want to put $50,000 on the sewer side of the Community Works Fund and $50,000 on the water side of the Community Works Fund. So basically, taxation goes down by $50,000 because they've removed their money from the to both the projects. So I'm opposed to this. This grant was I mean, I've been through it before, but it's a recreational designated facility that really has to stand on its own 2 feet for this sort of thing. We did allocate that money to the water system, and I stand behind that allocation. But I thought we had this settled. I thought we were, you know, we'd reached a compromise situation on it, and I'm really opposed to funding both sides of that scale. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Director Bonner, do you have any comments? You're muted though. No comments? No, you have to unmute. Hit the same microphone.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, got it. Not at this time. I think I'll just leave it the way it is.
Okay, thank you. So with that in mind, do you have any final comments, Director Roberts? And then we'll proceed to a vote. And then we'll get to Director Coots's comment. He had one, so.
Yeah, absolutely, through the chair. This is the only funding that that community has received from outside the taxation base. Everything that goes on inside Salmon Beach, the roads, all the improvements are through parcel tax. That's the entire budget. They receive no other funding other than this one-time community grant. And I respect the fact that they want to be able to utilize that to their best ability out there and to provide appropriate funding for the Sandy Field and for water. So we're splitting it between the two, and they'll have to come up with funds, other funds, if they want to proceed with anything further. So contrary to Director McNabb's comments, whether or not he says it's a recreational community or not, to my way of thinking that it is a community, it's a growing community, and we need to support them as best we can. And thank you for that.
Okay, so with that now, we will proceed to vote just so the rest, oh, Director McNabb.
So just a comment on those comments. We put $250,000 into the Long Beach walkway, plus $50,000 from rural planning into the Long Beach walkway. I mean, this is, while that may be a district of that community, like a community in that district, you know, it's still part of the overall funding. So, you know, to say that that's the only money that went in there, it's not. I mean, Long Beach have received money for their water system as well, and from this Community Works funding. And I mean, I'm disappointed that we've got to this point. I really thought that we had this settled. And for us to be carrying the load of both sides of that budget with this grant, one side on the water and the other side on the sewer, when the grant was specifically for the water system, you know, I mean, I agree with Director Cote. This should go back to the electoral area directors to have a full in-depth discussion.
Okay, Director Bodner.
Yes, whoops. I just wondering if this goes through, are we not setting a precedent for other areas to be able to say, well, they did it one time, so, you know, surely we can get it this one time as well. I think that this does need to be brought back and discussed so that everybody is on the same page. Thank you.
I think on On the question of precedent is set by courts. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. The decisions you make are within the bounds of the laws and policies that govern local government. So precedent's usually about deciding on how that gets parceled out and put through. So with that in mind, unless there are any other comments in regards to this, we'll just proceed to a vote. Director Cote, quickly, if you will, we're just coming up on noon.
Thanks. I had to wait till the phone stopped ringing. Tried. Just that really, if we leave this as is, I'd like to know if from Teri, can the budget be, because it's Salmon Beach, can funds be moved from water to sewer or back?
This motion does not affect the tax requisition at all, so it could be made by a budget bylaw amendment at a later date. Yes.
At a later date. So there's already $100,000 in the water community works fund transfer of $100,000 to the water. So at this time, so really it could be changed further down the road then, after the electoral area directors have a meeting?
Yes, it could, yes.
And then their waterworks would have enough funding. You could switch it from sewer to water to cover, so that they're both funded the same. It's just, it seems strange to me to have it split at this point when it really makes no difference at the end.
So we have a sewage project that is needing to be done as soon as possible at Salmon Beach to expand the field because of the demands out there. That project, I believe, might even be already tendered or is in the process of being tendered, but will be done this year whether the money gets moved or not. If the grant is used solely for Salmon Beach water and not sewer, then it's going to basically exhaust the Salmon Beach sewage capital reserve fund at this time, which is a bit of a concern because they have a truck that's going to need replacement in a couple of years and possibly further upgrades to the field. But the project's going to proceed either way. It needs to be done. And the Salmon Beach water project maybe will get done this year, but is not a priority for staff or the committee until we address the sewage issue.
Okay. Discussions earlier in the electoral area directors meeting was that the community works funds were switched without consultation with the electoral area directors. So we had that conversation and ended up with these funds of 100,000 going for the water. So I'd really like to hear from more information for the electoral area directors so they can make an informed decision rather than this last second.
And she dropped. Oh, there we go.
At this time. So, sorry.
So can I make a motion?
Oh, no, there's already a motion on the floor. So we're going to proceed to a vote now. And if this can wait till after that, then we can, because I want to be cognizant of the time. I don't know if people have to get out of here by a certain time. So all of those.
Could you just reread?
Okay, please reread the motion, and then we're going to proceed to a vote.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please, Wendy.
Okay. That the main motion be amended to include an additional amendment to the 2020 to 2024 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan, reallocating $50,000 of Community Works funds from the Salmon Beach water budget to the Salmon Beach sewage budget as follows. Electoral Area Administration, page 21, line 41, Salmon Beach sewage Sandyfield upgrade, increased by $50,000 to $50,000. Line 42, Salmon Beach Water Well Development decreased by 50 to 50,000. Salmon Beach Sewage, page 64, line 19, grants and other contributions increased by 50,000 to 50,000. And Salmon Beach Water, page 66, line 18, Community Works Fund transfer decreased by 50,000 to 50,000.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, we will proceed to a vote. I think we're going to have to just keep our hands up for all for and against. So, all right.
So, just a point of order: are these votes weighted because of the financial impact of them?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a budget vote.
Okay.
Okay. All those in
votes.
All those in favor. Keep your hands up. Okay. Great, thank you. All opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it looks like a motion carried. Okay.
Yes, carried.
Okay, so with that in mind, we can
with the weight that's carried. Sorry.
Yeah, both Port Alberni directors voted yes, and I counted 6 individual votes to the yes without my vote, and there was 4 opposed. 4 total votes, because.
So, Director, or Chair Jack, I really would like to investigate the position of the electoral area directors who control this community works fund to make sure that this was actually in order, because I don't think it is. I think that this fund, the funds from this are allocated directly by the electoral area directors, not by the board. And so I think that any jurisdiction on this falls to the electoral area directors, not to the board. So I'd ask the chair to investigate that and report back.
We can have a report back and make a correction. Since this is not something that will affect requisitions, I don't see the harm. We've just talked about this for over half an hour, and the result will be the same at that point.
As I said, I thought we had it settled last meeting. You know, because we did go through this.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, but we will have a report at the next meeting, Douglas. We don't need to talk about it now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so now we're proceeding to the second reading. And so are there any comments on now the fully amended second reading? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to third reading. However, Director Shannon, you had a comment about wondering about the impacts of the regional health district, and I'd like to have a cute and quick conversation about this. So, there we go.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't shushing you, I was shushing the kids.
Don't worry.
So my question is because I cannot now remember where I seen it, but that if we wanted to go over the hospital budget because it's been adopted, we could go today into hospital district meeting. And I would really like to review in light of everything that's happening. We went from 1.8 requisition $1 million to 1.9 to try to get us closer to the 2 million where we were before. I would like to have another look at that and perhaps stay, and I know I made that motion, but go back to the 1.8 if we go into hospital district.
Okay, so we do not have a hospital district meeting planned for today, I do not believe. Is that the case? So with that in mind, it's a bit of a loop-de-loo to get to that point, because board itself doesn't have jurisdiction over that. I believe it's the actual hospital district board, which is separate. Is that the case? I think that's the case. Douglas?
Mr. Chair, if it's the wish of the board could recess, and we've prepared, in talking to the hospital district chair, Osborne, we prepared a motion to make the necessary procedural motions to actually call the meeting to order, and we've distributed as well the existing hospital district budget, and Teri would be able to speak to that. And we've prepared a draft bylaw in order to rescind the last bylaw and adopt a new one if that's the wish.
Okay, so if someone would like to recess the meeting, the first thing I'd like to do with the board is check in and see how much time you have left, because I have an hour. So does anyone have any, so I can probably finagle that to be around for that, but I would like to just see.
I'm good to do that.
All right. So if there's no one else, so let's.
Probably 9 minutes, but whatever.
Okay. Director Cote, did you have any comments? Okay. All right. So if you'd like to make a motion, Director Shannon, to recess the meeting.
Yeah, I'll make that motion to recess to go into hospital district.
Do you have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Director Cote. All those in favor? Motion carried. We are recessed. Dr. Osborne, please become Chair Osborne.
Okay, you're gonna have to give me a minute, and I think everyone's gonna need a minute to pull up the materials.
Yeah, I'll need a couple minutes. I've got an agenda prepared in case this happened. So I just got to quickly put it together. Teri has to send me the revised backup for the budget, and we can send it out. So if I could have about 5 minutes.
Thank you. And as well, please remind us all that I believe the rules are, it needs to be a unanimous vote in order to hold a meeting without any public notice.
That's correct. So that would be part of the agenda, to waive notice by unanimous vote.
Thank you.
I'll just need a couple minutes, and I'll email it to everyone.
Okay, so we'll pause.
You're sent to a different email address.
Yes, please.
Did anyone else? Has anyone received it yet?
Yeah, I got it, Wendy.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Just the page numbers are off, but I think we're good.
Has anybody not received it? Okay, then I think we are good to go. So I will call to order our special board of directors meeting for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional Hospital District for Wednesday, March 31st, 2020 at 12:15 p.m. And first call on the directors for a motion to waive notice of the special meeting per section 220 sub 3 of the Local Government Act. Is there a mover? Director Scott. And the seconder, Director Roberts. All right. Is anybody not in favor of the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. So I'll recognize that we are meeting once again all across the Nuu-chah-nulth territories. And then if you just go right into the budget there, or sorry, the item 4 there, the budget bylaw. Teri, could you just walk us through the process that we will need to consider?
Sorry, missed the unmute button. So the bylaw that I have attached is still at the 1.9 because I didn't want to guess what you guys were wanting to move that to. So we just need to determine what you are wanting to move that reserve fund contribution to. So is the intent going to be to move it to 1.8? And if so, I'll just use that as an example. You'll basically give first reading and without voting on it, and then make the motion to reduce that reserve contribution down from $458,148 to $358,148, which will impact the tax requisition by reducing it by 100,000 to 1.8 million. And then if you vote on that amendment and then continue on to your other motions.
Okay. So in the interest of efficiency, I'm going to ask the board first, can anybody not live with the idea of $1.8 million requisition, reducing it by 100,000? And does anybody wish to bring up some points that you think we really need to consider before moving forward? Director Jack.
I just have one. Doesn't it seem funny to be reducing the budget to a hospital district in a time of a pandemic? That's just where I'm coming from. Just from a purely perceptive perspective, I'd actually see an increase would be more. I'm not proposing that because of time, but let's just gonna get that straight. I'm not gonna really vote either way on this. I'm just gonna vote on whatever's most expedient at the time, but just consider that perception.
Thank you. Director Cote?
Thank you. I think that this is just for capital projects. So I think that we rely on the province for the service portion, which would be regarding the COVID-19 pandemic relief. So not sure if I'm correct or not, but I think I am.
Thank you. Okay, so just given even that exchange, I wanted to ask our CAO, Doug, if you wouldn't mind just briefly kind of encapsulating the conversation that you and I had in the expectation of what might happen today. And as our staff, maybe if you or Teri wanted to present perspectives, you know, on sort of both sides of this issue, and I think that'll help the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just sort of recalling the conversation that we had in anticipating today's conversation. From staff's point of view, the contribution, which is in the $458,000 mark right now, as the budget has been passed on December, or probably March 11th, I think it was. That number is really about, in large part, capital asset management. And so it would be about replacing the current Tofino Hospital using reserves instead of debt, or using more reserves for the purposes of using less debt when it actually comes time for construction. In the global picture, from my point of view, the asset actually doesn't belong to the regional hospital district or to the regional district. It belongs to the province. So in my view, the acceptability of taxpayers locally for a new debt for the 40% share of a provincial asset, when and if that time comes for that hospital to get constructed, is probably higher on the acceptability levels than the incremental increases that we're going to be trying to do for capital asset management for the regional district side. And depending on the various services, we've seen a number of the plans now. In some places, we have some fairly heavy financial lifting to do to get to the point where we're making the contributions to our reserves to replace the assets that we actually own and operate right now. So in a perfect world without the pandemic, the conversation about which corporation do we accumulate cash in, I think would be a good one. And my point of view would be to accumulate it at the regional district level. So that's sort of the broader part of the conversation. More specific with respect to today, taking a deeper cut today, I think ought to be preserved. Taking a deeper cut in the requisition in the hospital district, I think ought to be preserved for a time when the board creates its capital asset management funding strategy. So the actually raising taxes to prepare the next generation to replace assets that we're using currently. I think that's the time to take the deeper cuts in the hospital district. From, again, that's my point of view, and it's up to the board to balance these things. And however, the sentiment overall, the global sentiment of raising money to put in reserves to avoid debt in the future, I think is laudable. The question just really has to be talked about as to where best to do that. And given today the balancing of the board's competing values on lowering taxes, et cetera, there is a good argument to say that building the hospital district reserve today perhaps could be eased a little bit for the purposes of trying to lower the 2020 tax burden. So Chair Osborne, if you can tell me if I've had anything left out or if that reasonably summarizes it to your satisfaction. Thank you.
No, that reasonably satisfies it to my satisfaction and gives me comfort with moving forward to reduce it to 1.8 this year. And that I think there's a discussion that will come next year for the financial planning process about your other point about the capital asset management planning on the regional district side of things. So I think I had Director McNabb next.
No.
No? Okay.
I'm good. Thanks.
All right. So having heard all that, does anybody wish to add something that you haven't heard yet about the idea of going from 1.9 to 1.8? Okay, so in that case, I would suggest we move forward with giving first reading to the bylaw, and then before voting, we're going to make an amendment. So would somebody please move first reading? Okay, Director Roberts, seconded by Director Jack. And now, Teri, if you wouldn't mind just helping us with the exact wording around an amendment.
Yeah, so amend the 2020 to 2024 annual budget as follows. Line 2, tax requisition, decreased by $100,000 to 1.8 million. And line 11, reserve fund contribution, decreased by $100,000 to $358,148.
Thank you. Somebody move that? Director Roberts, seconded by Director Cote. Any discussion on this? Director Cote.
Thank you. Did we not rescind this first? Because I thought
the
we
bylaw actually has. Yeah, so the bylaw that's been circulated as part of your agenda has clause 3 that says the bylaw cited as Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Hospital District 2020 to 2024 annual budget bylaw number 128, which is the one that we adopted on March 11th, is hereby repealed.
Okay. So is that the motion?
Yep, we have an amending motion before us right now. So that's the reduction of the requisition. And does anybody else wish to speak to the amending motion? Okay, is anybody not in favor of the amending motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried, and we're back to the main motion, which is first reading. Does anybody have any comment on first reading? Is anybody opposed to first reading? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Would somebody move second reading? Thank you, Director Johnson, seconded by Director Cote. Any discussion on the second reading? Is anybody opposed to the second reading of the bylaw? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Would somebody move third reading? Director Cote, seconded by Director Roberts. Any discussion? Is anybody opposed to third reading? Seeing none, the motion is carried. And finally, would somebody move adoption?
Move adoption.
Thank you, Director Cote. Seconded by Director McNabb. Any final discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, is anybody opposed to the adoption of this bylaw? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you. Would somebody move adjournment? Thank you, Director Johnson, seconded by Director McNabb. Is anybody opposed to adjournment? No, they are not. The motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. Back to you, Director Jack.
Okay, we have a mini director Jack here as well. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, so that brings us back to the main agenda, and we're on item 5B sub 2. And that brings us to third reading and then subsequently to adoption. So we do have the motion here for third reading, and it states that the Alberta-Clyde-Court Regional District Board of Directors give third reading to bylaw cited as bylaw F1149 2020 to 2024 Alberta-Clyde-Court Regional District Financial Plan. Do we have a mover?
I'd like votes recorded, and I'll move the motion.
Thank you. And moved by Director McNabb, seconded by Director Bodner. Are there any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Please, all those in favor, please show your hands.
Sorry.
Okay, Wendy, let me know when you're good. Yes.
Yeah, I'm good. Just
Okay.
waiting for.
And then all opposed.
I'm opposed.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Director McNabb.
McNabb is opposed. Thank you. Recorded.
Okay. And that brings us to declaring the motion carried. And that'll bring us to adoption under item 3. Motion states that the Alberta-Clyde-Court Regional District Board of Directors adopt bylaw cited as bylaw F1149 2020 to 2024 Alberta-Clyde-Court Regional District Financial Plan. Do we have a mover?
With votes recorded.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. McNabb, and seconded by Dr. Bodner. I saw your hand go up as well. Any further comments? Okay. All those, actually, I might do it the way that Director Osborne did it. That's really smart. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Thank you, Director McNabb. You've been recognized. And all those in favor then, assuming everyone else. Okay. Do you have any comments before we declare the motion, Director McNabb?
No.
Okay. I'll declare the motion carried, and thank you, everyone. Okay, so that brings us to any late business.